keeping a close eye on Georgia as the primaries play out there. Tomorrow's election day. Georgia broke a record for early voting ahead of tomorrow's deadline to cast in-person ballots. The nation's watching Georgia's races for governor, Senate, and Secretary of State. It's been a battleground for a few years now. So joining us now, Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tia Mitchell. Tia, thanks for being with us. So let's talk about the top of the ticket now. The governor, Governor Kemp, and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, they're both Republicans, but they are in former President Trump's crosshairs, aren't they? Because they wouldn't go along with his effort to steal Georgia from Joe Biden, the big lie that, you know, somehow there were gremlins in the voting machines and he lost all those votes. He's on a mission to replace them. How's that going?
Well, we'll start with Secretary of State Raffensperger. U.S. Rep. Jody Hice is Trump's preferred candidate, and it looks like he is polling pretty even with Raffensperger, and that race is likely going to be headed to a runoff if neither one of them receive 50% plus one tomorrow night. Now, when it comes to incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, he looks to be much more comfortable. It's looking, based on recent polling and even polling conducted by the AJC, that Governor Kemp could win outright tomorrow night, win a majority, not need a runoff, become the Republican nominee tomorrow night. And that just shows how strong Brian Kemp is among Republicans. Even those who believe in the big lie, they don't believe that Brian Kemp's actions during or immediately after the 2020 election disqualifies him from getting another term in office.
That's well put, Tia. I mean, President Trump's influence and hold on the Republican Party has limits, but it's because Brian Kemp has other virtues in the eyes of Georgia's Republicans, and it's not like he's anti-Trump. Trump is anti-Kemp, I think is the way to put it, as you just did. So let me ask you about...
And I think Governor Kemp has...
Please
I
go.
I just think Governor Kemp has avoided criticizing President Trump or returning fire. So you made a very good point. You know, Trump is very anti-Kemp, but Kemp, if anything, has tried to pivot away from Trump and focus on those things that he thinks makes him a strong candidate and a strong governor. Right.
So I think the analysis that's out there that if Kemp wins, it's an anti-Trump expression. It's not at all. It's a pro-Kemp Trump expression, it seems to me. But let's talk about Georgia. Was one of the real battlegrounds, obviously, after 2020, as Trump tried to steal that election, and there were changes made to the voting laws afterwards. How have Georgia's voting laws changed in ways that will impact these primaries, do you think?
So yeah, Georgia's voting laws were changed in a lot of ways. For example, you know, if you have an absentee ballot and you don't trust the mail system and you want to drop it off in a drop box, those drop boxes are no longer accessible 24 hours. You have to go inside an early voting location or inside, you know, an office to drop off your absentee ballot. So they're just not as accessible hours-wise and location-wise. There's more voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, and that could create more rejections of absentee ballots once they start arriving. You know, if there are long lines in Georgia, which sometimes happens in this state, outside groups cannot bring food and water. Even early voting was changed in ways that expanded it in some areas, but also constrained some counties who maybe wanted to do more early voting. It was standardized. So the question is, you know, in the margins, are there going to be people who after tomorrow night say they wanted to cast a ballot and they were not able? And if a race is close tomorrow night, the question is, did those tweaks to the law make a difference?
Well, and that might have been the purpose of those laws in the beginning for some people. But let's turn to the Senate race now. Georgia gave the Democrats control of the United States Senate. It's up for grabs again. What's happening in the Senate race?
Yeah, so, you know, Raphael Warnock has a token opponent in the primary, so he's very likely to advance. The bigger question is which Republican will go up against him in November, and that almost seems like a foregone conclusion as well. Herschel Walker, the former Georgia football star, has polled very well. We know that there are a lot of, you know, negative things in his past, and his limited policy platform could be a barrier in the general election, but it has not made much of a difference in the primary. And that's partially because Herschel Walker is not just a football star, he is a Georgia hero, Georgia born and raised, and his story is very much tied to the state. And Republican voters have been all in for him since day one, and it's looking like he will win his primary outright tomorrow.
One of the great college football runners of all time. We'll see how he does in the general election against Democrats who think he's vulnerable. But let me go to that Secretary of State race. It's going to be a runoff, it looks like, right? So that's Brad Raffensperger. Right. He was the guy on the receiving end of that phone call. Am I right? Where Trump was saying, come on, just find 11,000 votes. Come on, guys. And he stood up to the president of the United States. There was a wide expectation he was going to pay a price with his political career for doing so. What does that look like?
So you're right. And this is the price he's paying. He's got a Trump-endorsed challenger. Representative Jody Hice was one of the backers of the big lie. He led the attempt to reject Joe Biden's electoral college votes from Georgia. That didn't happen because Senator Kelly Loeffler, after the riot at the Capitol, refused to go along. But Jody Hice has been a very vocal Trump supporter, a very vocal supporter of the big lie. And I think the difference is, Raffensperger was more critical of Trump, more out front in fighting back against Trump when it came to his attempts to overturn the election. So I think he's more closely identified as a Trump opponent, a Trump critic, more than Governor Kemp. In addition, the Secretary of State it's harder for the Secretary of State to run on what I did. Governor Kemp can say, I cut taxes. I opened up businesses after the pandemic. I signed a bill to expand gun rights. And there just aren't as many things for a Secretary of State whose job most people don't pay much attention to run on. And so I think he's a little bit more vulnerable to the Trump criticism, which is why his race is much closer. There are a lot more undecided voters. And that's why it looks like Raffensperger and Hice may go to a runoff.
That's a great point. It's hard for a Secretary of State in the States to say, I got those vanity license plates out the door, faster than anyone in history. Is not really going to cut it if President Trump is against you. But we'll see. We'll be looking for it tomorrow night. Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Tia Mitchell, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.